Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Hello and welcome to Story by Story.
Sharing the human experience.
I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And we're storytellers. And we're also kind of producers of a TV show and some local storytelling venues. And we're going to spend an hour with you talking a little bit about storytelling in the Capital District and maybe beyond. And we have some wonderful guests.
Oh, yes.
And
definitely.
we'll come to those folks in a minute. But, you know, I'm still kind of just sitting here kind of with a really nice buzz on about the last Story Sunday, just this past Sunday in February at the Glenn Sanders Mansion, Socks Without Partners.
And other love stories.
And two of our friends, Lorraine Harton-Gilardi, who was here last week, and Karen Pillsworth, took that little theme of the experience that we've all had when the dryer empties and you don't have the matching socks and you don't know where they went, and you look in all the places that a static cling could clutch a sock, and that element was the structure for some of the most wonderful stories of love that I've ever heard. It was just was it great?
Yes, and obviously it wasn't all romantic love. Karen had a lovely story that's really stayed with me about how her parents really always had an open house for her friends. They said, you know, when she was a teenager, if your friends ever really need a place to crash, it's not safe for them to go home, you know, drive, have them come over. And the key is in the mailbox if we're not home. And they had a stash of sleeping bags and pillows and some, you know, and she said my mother got quite adept at walking over bodies that she would find in the morning scattered here and there. And she and her husband carried on the tradition, but their key is in the clothespin bag. Yes.
By the back door.
Yes.
Yep. I thought it was a wonderful touch to kind of revisit how the tradition gets carried over, because one could harvest a lot of stories. If you want an idea and say, well, I can't tell stories, think through some of the family traditions that live in your own homes, like leaving a key where everybody knows where it is. So if the mailman has to put a package inside, he can do it, or friends dropping by with a surprise birthday cake. You know, there are a lot of reasons to have people know where your key is.
Yes. I also want to share, since I just came up Wolf Road before I came to the studio, that I had a sock encounter on Wolf Road, that I had gone to Kinko's, and as I was walking out the door, so I live in Clifton Park, so I had gotten dressed, driven down here, walked into Kinko's, done my business. As I was walking out, a man said, "Excuse me, there's a sock on the back of your pant leg." And so I go, that's how they escape.
A sock on the back of your pant leg.
So,
well, I suppose you could talk about a sock. There's some things you'd see clinging, you know, that you wouldn't talk about, like the toilet paper on your shoes or
well,
those kinds of things.
Well, then you can go the generic. Well, there's something you might want to take care of. Yes.
All this is to say that if you're interested in storytelling, at our Story Circle at proctors.org website, you can find a lot of good references and links to storytelling. And we welcome folks at monthly meetings we have here at the Colonie Library or over on other months at the Gilderland Library. It's just a good way of coming around together, sharing fellowship, and learning more about the method of storytelling.
Because before movies, before TV, before radio, people talked. Player pianos were very popular because they entertained each other. It's sometimes the power goes out. You might want to know what to do in those cases.
Well, we know when the power goes out, the birth rate goes up. That's I'm sorry.
That's another show, I think, Joe. Another show altogether.
Well, there's another story about. We could talk about power outages.
No, not today. Not today, Joe.
But
what about our guests?
We have some guests who know quite a bit about storytelling and quite a bit about how the art and nature of storytelling can bring people together. With us today are some folks from the Interfaith Story Circle, and particularly the program Children at the Well, which is an effort that the Interfaith Story Circle, our cousins, have really developed to focus on bringing youth of different faiths together to learn both the tradition of storytelling, their own stories, and how storytelling in some traditions is a lot like stories in other traditions in terms of the messages that they teach. And we're really pleased. We've got the director, Paula Weiss, who's here with us. And we've got Ben Russell, who is an alumni, in effect, of Children at the Well, because you're now in college, right, Ben, at Hudson Valley, and you're finishing up there this year.
Yep.
But you started at Children at the Well when you were, as I said earlier, about a foot shorter in height, not in, but how old were you when you started? What grade were you in?
I was 14.
14. So when we met, you were about 14 or 15 the first time. Wow. I get dated now when I look at you guys all grown up. I say, holy crow, I knew them when. But and you grew up in Clifton Park, graduated from Shenandoah. Cool. And you're going to study philosophy?
Philosophy or religious studies.
Wow. And how did that happen?
I was going to. I was planning on studying technology, but. In Children at the Well, I realized that I was very interested in other people, other religions, and philosophy.
Wonderful.
Now, Paula shared with us once something that you had asked for a Hanukkah present that shows this interfaith interest.
Yeah. For Hanukkah one year, I received a Quran.
Well. That leads into the very nature, I think, of Children at the Well, Paula. And give us a little timeline on how Children at the Well has developed, and really some of its origin, and just a little touch, because we've got a little bit of time to fill out the story, too.
Sure. Let's see. Gert Johnson started the Interfaith Story Circle that you mentioned in 1993. And over the years, she very much wanted to bring some former students. She had been a teacher for a number of years, wanted to bring young people into this circle. But it remained mostly adults meeting once a month from all different religions to learn each other's stories. And then one day, my daughter was 11 years old, so that would have been 2003. We met Gert, and she invited my daughter to come, and me, to drive her, to the next Interfaith Story Circle meeting. And we went, and my daughter Ada was very taken with everything and wanted to come back. And for a couple of years, she was the only young person involved, really.
And telling stories, not just
listening.
Sitting there, no.
Telling stories in the circles, even at the Winter Lights performance. And some of us heard about an award program from the National Storytelling Network.
Actually, I was the one who, Gert said, gee, I really wish, Gert's my story buddy. I practice stories with her, and then she bounces organizational ideas off of me or anything else, story related. And she said, gee, I wish we could have a youth component to this. I said, gee, I think I just got an email from National Storytelling Network about applications are due in a little bit about the Brimstone Award, which is $5,000 to create a program that's new and that could be replicated in other places. Yeah. Brimstone has this idea of change and creation built in. Yeah. And so she looked into it, and then you were very involved in that whole
Yeah.
grant process.
We thought it was a great idea. We said, let's get this youth program together. And we had a couple of people that were willing to be involved as coaches. And I said, well, let's get the idea together. I'll write it down and we'll submit it. And we did, and we won
Bingo.
Ta-da.
for 2006. So that was our first year. And we got 14, Ben was part of that first group in 2006, so was my daughter Ada, and about 12 other kids. We had them work with 2 storyteller coaches.
Who we've had on the show, Mary
Yeah.
Murphy and Marnie Gillard.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And once a week for about 12 weeks, and then we had a performance at the Shenendehowa United Methodist Church. And it was great, and that was our first time. We've
And
been
you have a
going
big
since.
potluck supper too.
Oh, yeah.
That was I like the stories, but the supper's pretty good because everybody brings somebody from their own tradition, and it's just scrumptious.
Feeds your body and soul.
And soul, yes.
Yes, we have kids from many different traditions, religions, and countries around the world, so makes it a great potluck supper
Yeah.
and a great mix of stories.
And it's been remarkable for me to kind of see some of the kids develop, like Ada and Ben, because, you know, it's kind of an acquired art. And you've got it now, so however you go on, if you go on and become religious, if you could become a rabbi, for Pete's sake, you'll have that ability, and both as a public speaker and a communicator. And I'm just enthralled when I'm around the youth group of kids, because I see this wonderful energy and this intellectual connection.
And poise and
poise.
just comfort in being in front of a large group, which I think the fear of public speaking is right under the fear of death.
Right.
In the scale of fears, and that's been blown away by children at the Well.
So, in terms of current activity, you do seek new members. Do you have like a season where you bring in a new class or something like that?
Yeah, we're
When
right
does
in.
that,
Sorry.
when does that happen, and what does that look like?
Well, we're right in the middle of a session right now. We started early January, and we'll go until April. We'll have one performance on April 1st, and that'll be
You have an April Fool's Day storytelling program?
April Fool's Day. But it's not an April Fool's theme.
Right.
It's whatever stories the kids have decided speaks to them from their tradition. Kids choose the stories that they're going to tell. And so we never go with a theme because it's just, it doesn't work out.
Right. Well, it's their favorite stories.
Yeah.
And that's at the Schenectady Jewish Community Center on Balltown Road in Niskayuna at 2 o'clock on April 1st, followed by a vegetarian potluck supper.
It is. Thanks, Kate. Yeah.
There we go.
And another performance April 22nd, which will be at steamer number 10, also at 2 o'clock.
That's in Albany.
Albany. It'll be our interns, the kids who have been with us for a couple of years or more. And that will not be followed by an interfaith multicultural potluck supper, but it'll be a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now just a second. So as older kids acquire some skills, then they kind of become coaches to the younger kids as well? Is that what an intern is, or?
Not so much coaches.
Okay.
We have them help in a number of different ways. They're also our emissaries.
Ah.
We have a number of things that we have become involved in. We often get calls from churches, synagogues. Can you send a few of your kids over? That sort of thing. And it's been a lot of fun. We've been going out to libraries too to do that sort of thing. And also some conferences that we've become involved in.
And there was one in the Rochester area that you've been to at least once, and also at Northeastern in Boston, as I recall.
And then you went to one at either Middlebury or one of the colleges in Vermont too a couple of years ago.
Oh yes, that's right, to present, and that was a Power of Words.
Power of Words conference.
That was at Goddard.
Goddard, yeah.
That's right.
Now, so I'm going to pause here and just do a couple things. So if you're out there, you can check the Interfaith Story Circle or Google Children at the Well.
Well, their website is childrenatthewell.org.
There you go. And you can pick up on both the general background and two specific things that are fun. If you're involved in any religious organization that's looking for a solid program, contact these folks, because it's a great experience. I've had them in my church in Schenectady, and you get to take the kids out for the Bombers burritos afterward. It was just a great little time I had. So be mindful of that. And then what's even better is to kind of begin to build your own collaborative with the collaborative of Children at the Well from your own congregations, because that's what we'd like to have, is kids participate and kind of extend the reach of this really great philosophical and wonderfully warm fellowship of people.
Yeah.
Perhaps we ought to have a story, some example of the wonder of this art form as it exists
We've
among the
been
young people.
nattering on about storytelling for
yeah.
about 15 minutes. Let's just...
Mr. Russell.
I'm going to be telling a story that takes place in the town of Chelm. And this story is called The Golem of Chelm, and it's by Mark Binder. The town of Chelm is a town of fools. Well, some people say it's a town of people who are very, very wise. But they're so wise that no one understands them and thinks them foolish. Anyway, in Chelm, there are many different townsfolk, many different people. And they're all special. But one townsfolk in Chelm is different, even for Chelm standards, because you see, this individual is not what we would call, how you say, human. Yes, this individual is not human. This individual is a golem, a mythical creature made from inanimate objects and brought to life by a piece of paper with the name of God written on it that it uses as its tongue. And this story is how it was created, at least the first time. Long ago in the town of Chelm, there was a young rabbi. And it was the day before the first day of school. And on the first day of school, the children always played pranks on the rabbi. He remembered last year. Oh, it was horrible. As we all know, young rabbis live on coffee, and the children replaced his sugar dish with salt. So when he drank in his coffee, he couldn't think about it any longer, no. He asked every single person in Chelm to substitute for him, but everyone knew what that would involve, and everyone said no. Well, the rabbi was sitting in his study, and the rabbi had many interests. He was interested in mysticism and very interested in calligraphy. And as the young rabbi was sitting at his desk, he was reading. He was also looking over a letter, and he was also writing notes. He did many things at the same time, and what he was reading was very interesting, and he was distracted, so he didn't pay attention to what he was writing on the other piece of paper, and without realizing it, his mind wandered, and he drew a few pictures, and without even noticing it, he wrote the name of God. And the name of God has power, and he wrote it in beautiful, beautiful calligraphy. And next to it, he drew a goose, and he wrote a poem, and there was a horse, and eventually the paper was covered with doodles, and when the rabbi glanced at it, he thought it was just scrap now. So the young rabbi threw this paper, where all young rabbis throw important documents and scrap paper, into the laundry bin. And then he sat down and continued with his reading. But then he heard something. The rabbi looked over, but there was nothing there. He calmed himself. It was just his nerves. The first day of school was tomorrow. But then he heard it again, and he looked, and there was nothing there. He calmed himself, but then he heard it again. He knew he heard it, and he stood up and he looked. There must be a child in the classroom, but there was still nothing there. As he was about to sit down again, he saw that his laundry bin was shaking. And then, from the laundry bin arose a thing. He didn't know what it was. It was a thing. It was wearing the rabbi's gardening boots and his comfiest pair of pants that he wouldn't wear to a formal occasion, and it was wearing the rabbi's finest jacket with a torn shirt underneath it. And on top of its head was a hat that the rabbi's mother had given him, and the creature didn't have a head. It had a pillowcase with a tear in it that seemed to be where a mouth should be. And the rabbi screamed, and the creature screamed. And when the creature screamed, the rabbi saw that the creature's tongue was a piece of paper. And he saw that this was the paper he was writing on, and he saw the name of God on this paper. And he knew what this creature was. This creature was a golem, a mystical creature brought to life by the name of God, made from inanimate objects. And should this paper be destroyed, it would fall to the pieces that made it. And the rabbi looked at the golem and said, "You are a golem." And the golem looked at the rabbi and said, "You are a golem." Well, eventually they had it straightened out that the rabbi was in fact a rabbi, and the golem was in fact a mystical creature brought to life by a piece of paper. It was very, very simple when you don't think about it. Anyway, the rabbi realized that he had created the perfect substitute teacher. Well, the next day of school came, and the children all ran to the classroom, and they talked and laughed with each other, and then they decided to discuss the pranks that they were going to pull on the rabbi this year. And one child said that he had covered the chalkboard with wax so that when the rabbi tried to write, the chalk wouldn't stick. Another child laughed at this and said that he had placed a piece of stale matzah on the rabbi's chair so that when the rabbi sat down, it would break and get crumbs all over his fine attire. Well, another child scoffed at both of them, for he had found where the rabbi's lunch was, and he had replaced the meat in the rabbi's sandwich with an old dirty dish rag so that when the rabbi bit into it, the rabbi would be biting into who knows what. Well, they waited and waited, but the rabbi didn't show up, and it was getting late. The rabbi should be here by now. But then the door turned, and in walked something. It wasn't the rabbi. It wore the rabbi's clothes, but it was puffier than the rabbi and had a pillowcase for a head. And one child said, "Rabbi, wearing a pillowcase can't protect you from our pranks." And the creature turned and said, "Sheket," which means be quiet. So of course all the children were very quiet. And it didn't have the voice of the rabbi, so they knew it must be a substitute. Well, the substitute walked up to the chalkboard, and all the children snickered. But the substitute seemed to reach inside its chest and pull out a towel, and it wiped off the chalkboard and then continued with the lesson. Well, later in the day, the substitute sat down on the chair, but the matzah didn't break because it seemed the substitute was too light to break the matzah. Well, that was boring. The children knew that there was one more prank, though, and it was the best of all. So they waited until lunch. And when lunch came, they all got their snacks and then watched as the substitute picked up his bag. And they watched as the substitute reached in and took out the sandwich. But the substitute didn't eat it. The substitute reached in the bag again and took out 2 dirty socks. And in horror, in stunned horror, the children watched as the substitute ate both dirty socks. And then the substitute looked at the class, opened up the sandwich, and took out the dirty dish towel. And the substitute smiled at the class and seemed to say, "Thank you." Now, who knows what the children may have learned were the dish towel dry, but no, the dish towel was dropped in a puddle on the way to school, and it was soaking wet. And when the golem ate it, the water ran on the paper, and the ink started to run, and the paper started to tear. And with the paper gone, the paper with the name of God written on it, the golem fell apart into the pieces that had created it. And the children screamed and ran from the classroom and ran home and told their parents, who ran to the school to see what was happening. And when they got there, all they saw was the rabbi sitting calmly at his desk, reading a book, with a pile of laundry in a corner. The rest of the school year was very uneventful. And the next year, on the first day of school, the rabbi was not nervous at all. The children, on the other hand, were rather nervous. And as for the golem of Chelm, well, he was destroyed once, but he'd be back again. Though that's a different story.
The Golem of Helm. Oh, man. Now, Mark Binder is a storyteller in Rhode Island, and he's written a number of books, and so that's the root of the story. But you know, you've kind of done your own primary research on this mystical Eastern European town of Helm, right?
Yeah, I've read a lot about Helm.
Well, that's your specialty. I'm not sure I've ever heard you tell a story that wasn't from Helm. Am I?
I've told a few stories.
A few.
Yeah.
Okay, but 80% of
people yell at me when I don't tell Helm.
That's right. That's right. You've become known for tell them a Helm story. Tell them a Helm story.
But this is a ghosty one. It's sort of a dark one.
How did Helm find you?
Well, I was looking through traditional Jewish tales, and many of them came from the town of Helm. It's just part of Jewish folklore. So, I mean, they were all just there, and I found many of them very funny, very interesting, and decided to tell them.
But they weren't part of your own family tradition.
I'd heard, I mean, at synagogue, like we were told some stories, and some of the stories I heard were traditional Jewish stories that took place in towns with foolish people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember people saying it was Helm, but that probably wasn't important to me at the time where it was.
Okay, so you heard of them early on. I was just wondering how prevalent Helm was in the general Jewish tradition, or whether it was just in the Jewish storytelling tradition.
I mean, it's their stories, and a lot of them aren't stories with great deep,
Religious
meaning.
yeah.
So there are other stories that need to be told, but they're fun stories. They're nice stories. They're happy stories for the most part.
Yes.
I think you'll find them in theater. I think there was even something recently on Broadway. I can't remember the name of it, but it was definitely a Helm story. So there's an awareness of river.
It's an interesting medium because, in a way, you really don't tell it as a narrator. You change who you are. When you're swallowing the socks, you're the golem. When you're waiting for the matzah to crack, you're the kids. When you're feeling anxious about going to class and being preoccupied, you're the rabbi. So you actually change the character and the nature of it. It's the way you tell a story. And do you sense that when you tell the story? Because I was watching you do that, and you kind of, your voice changes, your demeanor changes and stuff.
It's very fluid. I mean, when I'm being looking at things in the perspective of one character of the story, I am aware that I'm with that character, but I don't really think about where I'm jumping.
Okay.
It just
Just kind of happens.
Yeah.
You're rooted in the story, and you go with the flow of it.
And that's probably the most important aspect to telling a good story is you kind of take it on as a cloak. And
Because you're there, your listeners are there too.
Yeah. It's good. Wow. That was really nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciated that. So that's what a story is like. That comes out of a cultural religious tradition, and some stories are biblically or based in the Quran or the other religious idioms of various folks. And one of the things that intrigues me about the whole program is if I hadn't been at a interfaith story circle or to a Children at the Wells concert, I never would have gotten in the Hindu temple. I wouldn't have gotten to a couple of synagogues or a Buddhist congregation or a whole range of places of worship that I was curious about. But, you know, how do you go knock on the door of another religion and say, do you mind if I take a tour? So that's one of the other nice things about faith communities that are involved. They do host the group and open their doors to folks to come in and learn a little bit more about that particular religion. So it's really been, I think, a very valuable community outreach effort in and of itself. Neat.
Neat. Shall we go on to coming events?
I think we ought to, because we got a lot of stuff going on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
March is a busy storytelling month here.
What do we got going on, Kate?
Okay, first we start off with Word Plays, our series at Proctor's, and we're in our 5th season there. On March 4th at 2 p.m., we have Feisty, stories about feisty people who risk it all, told by Janet Carter from Saugerties and Claire Nolan from Albany.
And those are two ladies who definitely qualify as feisty, in my opinion. Claire, for those of you who know her, are aware that she and her husband both are very green people, so they spend a lot of their time traveling around the Capital District on their bicycles. They do have a car, but they mostly ride their bikes. So,
yes, indeed. Yes. So that's the beginning of the month. And then the next Sunday, we have Story Sundays, which is our storytelling dinner series for adults at the Glenn Sanders Mansion. We have Fiddling Around Irish Stories. It's March 11th, 5 p.m. with Marnie Gillard, who has been one of the coaches at Children of the Well, not this year, but previously. And Lawson, which is a husband-wife duo, Hillary Schroff, I always have to think, who plays the fiddle, and Eric Everson, who plays the Irish bouzouki.
kind of like a guitar lute combination.
Lute and maybe a little mandolin.
Yeah,
you know, I think it's got a bulbous thing.
And they've worked together before on Marnie's production of Granuel.
Grace O'Malley, the Irish Pirate Queen.
And this is the first time they've kind of just done something with just the two instruments in the story. So
right.
It should be fun.
Yes, yes, indeed. Marnie has a whole realm of Irish stories. She is Irish by blood, and so I'm looking forward to that. And then the next night, we don't always remember to tell you about this, but there is a storytelling open mic up in Saratoga Springs. And half of the time it's at Cafe Lena. And on March 12th, they're at Cafe Lena, 7 p.m. And the featured teller is Kent Bushman.
Yes. One of Three Spirits, yes.
Yes, and whether we'll have some Adirondack Tall Tales or a moose telling stories
it'll be just interesting to see if he brings the moose.
Yes.
Brings the moose. And if you don't know what the moose is, then show up on the 12th at Cafe Lena, because Kent is one of my favorite storytellers, and it'll be well worth the opportunity. And you know, I think he could be lured down the street to that new Irish Times pub at the end of this little event, but I'm not sure. But if you're interested in doing that, then definitely show up at the story.
Yes. Okay. But I think those are all sort of regular events that happen pretty much every month.
We have some irregular events? Oh,
yes,
good.
Well, we have something that's very special. The 31st Sharing the Fire, which is the Northeast Storytelling Conference, is going to be in Albany for the very first time, March 16th through 18th.
And that's a big deal?
Yes, Joe, that's a big deal.
Oh.
I'm laughing because he's on the organizing committee for it.
Yeah.
It's organized for League for the Advancement of New England Storytelling, and New England, in their mind, kind of spreads out into New York, and you know, it's a loose definition of New England. But their website is lanes.org, LANES.
And there are some wonderful programs that we're going to talk about, but the heart of the matter is 38 workshops and learning sessions, so that if you're interested in learning more about the method and the how of storytelling, if you're a teacher in a classroom, if you're a lawyer who has to stand up in front of a jury, things that'll help you make
in the
make a difference.
healthcare industry, working on healing people.
All of those topics are there, and I really encourage you to check that out. You can register for one day or the whole conference, and there are some special performance or showcases coming up.
There are 4 performances open to the public and a swap. But the first one, it has this wonderful title. Joe thought it up with little help from some other friends. On Friday, March 16th at 7 p.m., Vagabond Shoes, Stories from New York.
These vagabond shoes are belonging to stray. Oh, you got to show up on Friday night.
This is at Page Hall on the downtown campus of the University of Albany in Western Avenue. And there are tellers from all around New York State, including Kent Bushman. So you can catch him on Monday up in Saratoga and Friday down in Albany.
And there's some very notable folks there. Jonathan Kruk, who is a very well-known historical storyteller who's going to tell some stories of the Hudson Valley history. Lee Ellen Marvin, who is on the faculty out at Ithaca College and is a renowned story coach and storyteller. And the MC of that program is Lorraine Harton-Gilardi, who was here last month and was the part of the duo that really wowed us at Story Sunday just this last month in Scotia. So it's a great lineup. If you do nothing else with Sharing the Fire, try to hit that Friday night concert.
Oh, but there's also something on Sunday.
Sunday, yes.
Yeah, but meanwhile, on Saturday night, the rest of them are at the hotel that is hosting the conference, the Sovereign Hotel, on the other end of Western Avenue, almost into Guilderland.
Right opposite the Uptown campus of State University of New York at Albany.
University at Albany is what it's
yes,
called.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes. Not everyone has grew up here and knew the old name.
Well, at least I didn't call it the normal school. You know.
Well, you're not that normal, though. Moving right along. Saturday night at 8 p.m., there's it's called the Olio performance, and I've kind of been downplaying the name because you have to explain what an olio. I've only heard it in storytelling. A whole bunch of people submitted stories to tell, and then a jury selected the 5 best to make a program. And they'll be telling at 8 o'clock. So the stories are not related. They don't have a theme, similar to the Children at the Well. These are just great stories. We have one local storyteller, Joe Peck, who's going to be there, and then people from Massachusetts, Maryland, New York City, and Los Angeles. Bill Ratner is a 7-time winner of the Moth Story Slams out in Los Angeles.
So these are some really top-rated folks. And our local Joe Peck has been a guest on our show and is a working dairy farmer from up in Schuylerville. And I'm not sure which story he's going to tell, but he has a very down-home way of telling a story and a constant twinkle in his eye. So that's a good one.
Okay, but following that at 9:30 is going to be the first Story Slam hosted by Lanes,
Right.
which is a storytelling competition, eerie stories. And they could be, like your golem could be an eerie story,
right.
or it could be something about the Erie Canal, or
you could, well, you want to keep your golem out of the canal because otherwise he's going to.
well, it's supposed to be, actually, it's supposed to be a personal story.
It's very personal to me.
Right, storytellers can do things like that, yes. 4 minutes, though. The golem wasn't 4 minutes. And part of the loveliness of it was that it wasn't. But there will be prizes, and that is free and open to the public. The others have modest charges. And you can find out more at lanes.org. And then finally, we have, oh my goodness, a performance by Children at the Well, Sunday morning at 9:30.
Now,
Speak to us about it.
Speak to us about what's going to happen.
We'll have 4 kids from Children at the Well, and Mary Murphy, story coach, will be there to MC. I think either I or Nancy Marie Payne, who's the other story coach this year, will be there as well. And there'll be a variety of stories, also opportunity for the audience to ask questions of the kids.
Because you would like this idea of youth storytellers for peace and understanding to spread.
We certainly would. We would love for storytellers in many different parts to get inspired to think about starting their own in their own towns, and we'd be more than happy to help.
Right, and for those of you who are interested in just this aspect of the Sharing the Fire conference, you can come just to this program at 9:30 to 10:30 on Sunday morning,
Sure.
and probably get a cup of coffee along the way, and have an introduction to the folks and the stories, and get your own assessment, and perhaps there's a way that the seed would take root in your own hometown or place, and we'd welcome that. It'd be great.
Certainly.
Yes. So that ends Sharing the Fire for this year, the public performances. But not to worry, we have one more. We have 2 word plays at Proctor's in March, because one really belongs in April, but the dates didn't work out. So March 25th is really an April performance.
It's really April Fool is what we're trying to say.
Yes, that's right. We're having it a week early. Sunday, March 25th at 2 p.m., Crazy Glue with Margaret French and Marnie Gillard. Things that stick like crazy glue. And so there's a coupon on the website, storycircle@proctors.org, where you can save $4 a ticket. Margaret has a blog. You can go onto our website, storycircle@proctors.org, and click on YouTube, and you can find these ladies telling stories there. If you're kind of going, well, I don't know if I'll like them. Well, watch them, and you'll find out how great they are.
When you come to Wordplace, you also have an intermission with cookies and coffee and soft drinks and things. So it's quite a charming experience in the gallery at Proctor's.
Which is the second level. It's above the box office, and it overlooks the atrium. So please come and join us there. And let's see, I've mentioned YouTube, and you can always become a patron of Story Circle at Proctor's. As with all arts organizations, ticket prices do not cover all of our expenses. And so this year we were lucky enough to get enough donations to cover 85% of our operating costs.
Wow.
So,
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And so...
and if you do make a contribution to Story Circle at Proctor's, it is fully tax deductible.
Right,
too.
we're under the Proctor's umbrella.
Right.
And better still, we had one donation from somebody who works for GE, so we got double her money. Woo!
Oh. We don't do this for the money, just so the record shows, but we do like to have a little bit of wherewithal to enable some good things to happen.
And we like our storytellers to be reimbursed partially for their efforts. We would love to pay everyone $500 performance. We're not there yet. We're not there that the producers get any money yet. But oh well, enough of that.
Enough of that.
Do you have another story for us?
Of
Because
course.
we have almost 16 more minutes. So.
All right. This story also takes place in the town of Chelm, and this is a traditional story. This story is about the wisest man in all of Chelm, Shlomo the scientist. Yes, Shlomo. It was as if when God created him, that God poured all the wisdom of Chelm into Shlomo's head. But he must have neglected other aspects, because Shlomo was not a very attractive man. One Chelmite once said to Shlomo, "Shlomo, how is it that a brain like yours is in such a weak little body?" And Shlomo looked at him and replied, "I was born a beautiful boy. But the midwife, she made a mistake. She switched me with an ugly baby. I am not myself. I am the beautiful boy. He is the ugly one." Yes, Shlomo was a truly wise Chelmite. And one story that exemplifies his wisdom was when Chelm needed a new cemetery. Because you see, Chelm was originally a very small village, but it grew. And there came a time when the graveyard was full. And the Chelmites knew that something must be done about this, because with a full graveyard, well, no one can die. And this is both rude and very inconvenient. So all of Chelm was called to come to a council, to come together to discuss what must be done. And it was, of course, decided that a new graveyard must be built. But where should it be? Well, the younger generation said that the new graveyard should be built on top of a nearby hill, because from this hill, the dead would be able to hear the birds tweet in the morning, be able to look upon all of Chelm, and there would be a nice river going by on one side. It would be a beautiful place to be dead. But the older generation said no, that this wouldn't work out, because the hill was so far away from the old cemetery, and once you were done walking through the old cemetery and visiting your relatives there, you would have to walk all the way to the hill and trek up all the way to the hill to visit your other relatives. No, this would not work. They said that the new cemetery must be right next to the old cemetery. And as the older generation, and thus closer to use the cemetery, their opinion won out. So it was decided that the new graveyard would be built right next to the old one. But how big should it be? Well, they couldn't go by the measurements of the old cemetery, because Chelm was bigger now. They didn't know what to do. But Shlomo the scientist had an idea. And Shlomo said, "We will all go to the field, and we will all lie down next to each other. One man, one woman, one child to each plot. And I will measure it out, and then we will know exactly how big to make the new graveyard." Well, this was an ingenious idea. This was great. So the Chelmites cheered, but Shlomo calmed them down and said, "But when we get older, we get bigger. To account for this, we will all wear our winter attire." So that's just what the Chelmites did. They went to the field wearing all their winter clothing, all of their jackets and scarves and furs and hats. Everyone was dressed as if it was winter. And each person lay down next to one another. And Shlomo the scientist then went out and measured the entire thing. And when it was done, the Chelmites cheered, because now they could build the new cemetery. Now people could be buried in a cemetery. This was great, and they celebrated. Everyone except for Shlomo the scientist. And this confused the Chelmites, because after all, it was Shlomo's great idea. So the Chelmites came to him and asked him what was wrong, and Shlomo replied, "You see, because I was the one to measure it, I do not have a grave myself." Well, this did not sit well with the Chelmites. The Chelmites were very kind folk, and it was decided that in honor of Shlomo's willingness to give up his own spot in the new cemetery, and for his great idea, it was decided that Shlomo would be the first one buried in the new cemetery. I still don't know how that worked out.
Oh.
Now that's a truly absurd story.
Yes.
That
The
is
other one had a nugget of
wisdom
in there, the name of God being so powerful.
Or I was thinking it was a teaching tale. Don't play pranks on your teacher, because you never know what's going to.
Right. This one has no virtue at all, Ben.
Well,
Maybe it's just hidden.
It's hidden virtue. It did make us laugh, though.
be careful in your picking your planner. And I'm going. I have a very analytical mind. I'm going, what about the next,
The next generation?
Right, or people might, if Helm is growing, an extra, build in a little margin, but they had a problem with just one missing.
It's a fun story, though, and I think that the Helmite stories are all enlightening in a way. And perhaps the message, having been through far too many committee meetings, is that the reduction to the mean can be downright frightening in its stupidity at times, and therein lies some of the virtue, because sometimes just describing the current situation is absurd. is very helpful to be able to make that. So I'm sure in some point in time you've said, well, I could be at helm, this is so crazy, and everybody looks at you, so really? You know, kind of thing. And then you kind of turn the idea into a verb in a way. This is something that's active and living. So I just found some virtue in that story. There you go. There you go.
Yes. Well, it could be a springboard on, well, what else could they have done that might have been a little more sensible? What did they forget about? You know, it could.
And let me.
But maybe that's just killing the joy of it.
Let me ask you a question, and it goes back to the present at Hanukkah, which was the Quran. You know, one of the questions that I often find myself asking to people who are concerned about the Middle East or a place where there's religious strife in the world is how many Buddhists they know or how many Muslims they know. How many folks of different faiths do you count as friends?
I have many friends of different faiths. I mean, of course, I'm Jewish, so so growing up, most of my friends were Christian. You know, just the majority of people.
Yeah.
But I mean, even then, I knew of different faiths. I knew that I was different, but I didn't know many other people. But in Children at the Well and just in growing up and meeting new people, I have met many people from different faiths, and I have many friends who of different religions, of different cultures, different backgrounds.
I just read in the Times-Union yesterday that Clifton Park is going to be a different sort of scenario in years to come with the plant in
Right.
Malta,
Right.
bringing in people from all over the world.
Because maybe another way of asking the question is, if you were to meet somebody from a tradition that you didn't know before, are there things that because of Children of the Well you would do to begin to engage that person? I'm just, you know, I can't think of. Sometimes Christianity is a complex set of faiths, so you could run into an Eastern Orthodox Christian is different than a Methodist and all that stuff. But is there an openness, or are there things that you might look to be the same in terms of starting a conversation?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go up to anyone and start a conversation based exclusively on
Right.
culture. But I mean, when it does come up, I myself know, I know that I have a background in knowing what the person I'm talking to feels and believes, and I'm respectful. I always make sure I understand. I might not necessarily believe similarly, but I do understand the truth of what the person is saying, whether or not be my truth.
Okay.
So.
I have
Good
a
answer,
question.
by the way.
I have a question for Paula, which I just thought of, so I haven't warned you about it.
Okay.
But you were brought in because your daughter Ada was interested in storytelling.
Yeah.
And she's now off. Not only is she in college, she's in India now, right? I mean, so. But here you are, still involved. And Ben, your mom is still involved in Children at the Well. Why? Or why? Well, you know, why do you do the things you do? Or that's a song from somewhere. Or share a favorite moment at Children at the Well.
It's been so much fun seeing these kids grow and become, close and learn about each other and just develop all kinds of wonderful skills and then branch out and take from their experience at Children at the Well and go out into the world. We see, already. It's only been, this is our 7th year, we see Ben here, as you've heard about. Mm-hmm. John Lydon has been working on a documentary of Children at the Well. We have Nimi Jayaraman spent last semester in Vietnam And while she was there, she went and visited a woman who was a victim of the war, of the Vietnamese War, and has had a movie by Oliver Stone made of her life. And Nimi brought this woman to Union College to speak very recently. Who am I forgetting, Ben? Let's see, who's doing... Well, these kids are just doing wonderful things, and it's so great to see. And now that my husband and I are empty nesters, I have a whole new brood, and I enjoy it very much.
Yes. Oh, also, you had me, I'm their webmaster, you had me cut a clip out of, from the very first year, like a 1.5-minute story that I've forgotten his name. Alaudin told. And it sounded like it was the first time he told a story. Whereas now he's blossomed into a wonderful story.
Yeah, speak of stature in that lineup. I mean, there was Ben and Alaudin, and they were tiny, and my daughter Ada was towering over them, and now,
yes. Yeah. Well, Ben's grown another foot, so. Yes. So.
Yeah.
Right. Gotten very tall. Because I certainly remember the visit that the kids made to First Reform, and we had an earlier gathering of state storytellers that you guys were there, and it was Retham was telling the story, and KJ was there, and it was the same room that you had told the story of Helm with that other group, and there was this spontaneous encouragement from these young people, and I remembered Retham, but KJ had gotten to be big and tall, and there he was, and he was the other kid who was. So I haven't been able to keep track of them the way I'd like to, but I certainly do have a great affection for all of you and all you've done. I think it's just been a great example, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in kind of sharing the fire, so to speak, with Children at the Well to get in touch. And to make a connection. Simple ways of just like showing up at the concert at the Sovereign Hotel, or
going to the performance on April 1st and April 22nd, which will be on the website later today.
Right. So those are all opportunities to make good connections with one of the more remarkable programs in the Capital District.
So we're just about out of time.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you for joining us, and since it is the month of St. Patrick's Day, may all your roads rise to meet you.
Yes.
And may you meet a story along the way, too.
And share one also.
There you go.
Please come back and join us next month. We don't know who we're going to have yet, but there'll be someone absolutely wonderful.
That's right.
It goes all my life's a circle. Sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle. I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round.